August 11th, 2017.
This is Nerd Bourbon episode 10. I'm Seth Sturgill.
And I'm Todd Sturgill.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
It feels good. It feels good to be back in the saddle with you this week. A little earlier than usual. We're recording actually several days earlier than we normally do. And I don't know, it feels kind of nice. It feels kind of nice to have an early week.
Yeah, I honestly like getting this recorded and around in the first half of the week.
Yeah, I figured you got a doctor's appointment. We both work tonight, but it's just nice to kind of get it over and done with. And I know you got a doctor's appointment tomorrow, so I wanted to get this knocked out because the day that we normally record would have been weird. So it's just nice to get it. It would
have been fine if we recorded that day, but honestly, it's I don't know how this. It's only they're lancing a fucking cyst.
Yeah, like a cyst on your back, right?
Yeah, it's it hurts.
But. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you're getting that shit taken care of because, like I said, that shit can definitely be dangerous. Let's go ahead and we got to get right into it. This isn't going to be another single topic episode, akin to the pizza episode. And if it's anything like that shit, we're going to be talking for a while. So.
Oh, with the topic this time, yeah.
Yeah, considering what this topic is, we're definitely going to be here for a little bit. So what have you been up to this week, man?
I've been playing a little more Nioh.
Good deal.
That's really it. Other than me and you playing Splatoon a little bit.
Yeah, we did that. We did that Splatfest this past weekend. That sweet mayo versus ketchup or blood versus jizz.
That's a good way of putting it. It's terrible.
It was so gross because they mayo versus ketchup was the theme of the Splatfest, but they made the ink. They colored the ink to look like mayo and ketchup, and it wasn't just white and red ink. It was that slight off-white color that mayo is.
It's not good.
And the ketchup, the red ink was just a little too shiny, and it looked a little too real.
It really actually now that I'm thinking back to the Splatfest, I'm just when it was all together.
Yeah.
It was just bloody jizz.
Oh God, yeah. Just when you look at the map.
Yeah.
That's
terrible.
Did you play much of Splatfest in Splatoon 1? Did you do any of them?
I asked some real shit. The only time I really played Splatoon 1 was when I was playing with you, so I never really... I've probably fucked around with a few of them, but not as many as you, because you did all of them.
You had something wrong with your Wii U. Your Wii U wouldn't read certain discs and shit, so we'd be able to play Splatoon for an hour before it crapped out.
It did the same thing with
Smash.
Splatoon, Smash, which always pissed me off. Ugh.
Yeah, because we'd be getting a good solid game going, and then it would just crap out on you. It sucked. But Splatfest, I don't know. Splatfest is pretty cool because I think I was telling you this when we were playing. It actually sort of influenced the lore of Splatoon a little bit. The final Splatfest of Splatoon 1. I played all the Splatfests in Splatoon 1 because I played. I don't have my Wii U around to check, but I can tell you that I probably played north of 200 hours of the first Splatoon.
It's disgusting.
And because the Wii U has that activity log, you can see exactly how long you played everything. It was over 200 hours. It was max rank, blah blah blah. I had all my shit, and it got to the point though where I just only turned it on to play Splatfest, and it's just Splatfest is just always a fun time. It's just cool to kind of fight for your team and shit. And but anyway, the final Splatfest was Callie versus Marie, the two Squid sisters, and Callie ended up losing, and so I guess minor spoilers for Splatoon 2 story. Callie is kind of the almost antagonist or the crux of Splatoon 2's single player campaign. Mm-hmm. And I feel had she not lost, I feel they developed Splatoon 2's story with that in mind.
Okay.
If Callie had been the one to win, Marie would have been the one. It's actually kind of cool. There's actually a whole, you can look it up. There's a whole thing called the Squid Sisters Diaries where they have a whole, again, it just influenced the lore, and I just think that's kind of neat. The teams for this one, this is the first Splatoon 2 Splatfest. The teams were Mayo versus Ketchup. Todd and I both played for Team Mayo because fuck Team Ketchup. I like ketchup.
Fuck ketchup and no, fuck ketchup.
I'm fine with ketchup, and I like ketchup and mayo together. I would have said fuck mustard, except for on a hot dog.
I prefer mustard over ketchup.
That's
any
fair
day.
enough. But Mayo ended up winning overall. They won 2-1. Ketchup took the popularity vote with a whopping 73%. Here's the fucked up thing. So let me just real quick. Ketchup won popularity 73%. Mayo took the solo wins with 52%, and Mayo took team wins with 51%. So the win ratio is pretty evenly split, as it always is.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal. Ketchup fans are butthurt because they're like, we won the popularity votes so handily, it's kind of bullshit that Mayo still won overall. And it's bullshit because the only reason that Ketchup took popularity is because everybody is so on Marina, and Marina was like the Ketchup representative, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely.
So that's really what it boils down to. I think if Pearl were repping Ketchup instead, the tide would have been a little more evenly split. But people are all butthurt, and I'm just like, honestly, Mayo still won 2 out of the 3 categories, and is it pretty evenly split? Yeah, it could have honestly gone either way, but I'm glad that Mayo won, and I'm glad that I am the one true Mayo King. I sat there and grinded out to get the Mayo King rank, and later, after we're done recording this, I'm gonna turn on Splatoon and reap my sweet rewards. But I've been playing a little bit more Pyre. Other than that, I'm probably like 7 or 8 hours into the game at this point. I did my first Liberation Rite. I'm about to do the second one. I think I told you the premise of that game is like you have like a group of exiles, and anyway, it comes to a head, and it's like, hey, once you get to the Liberation Rite, it's like kind of more high stakes because you can actually fail them, and like the Liberation Rite is kind of the final challenge of the set of rites. So you choose somebody in your group, to get returned to the mainland and get out of exile. And it's actually kind of fucked up because, the obvious thing is like, oh, well, I'll just send away somebody that I don't really use that much. You can't do that because they have to have a certain level, they have to be a certain character level, essentially, to be eligible for the rite.
Okay.
So in other words, you have to send away somebody that you've been using a lot. And that fucked me up. It's a really, really smart design decision, but I was like, God damn it, that makes this choice even harder because now I have to send away somebody that I actually like. Conversely, in order to send away somebody that I don't normally use, it forces me to use them more, and now I like them, So it's actually really smart. Pyre is a really, really good, unique game, and I'm really looking forward to playing more of it. I might end up doing a solo shots, just like I did with the other game I played this week, which is Tacoma, another indie game that I like a lot. By the guys who made Gone Home. I did a solo episode of Shots that is going to be posted by the time you're listening to this. And it's just a short, like 6-minute little episode of Shots where it's just me essentially giving a review of the game. You should go listen to that. I don't want to give too much of my thoughts away in here to cannibalize the episode of Shots that I spent time writing and recording. But you should go listen to that. But Tacoma's a really good game. I really liked it a lot. Really smartly well-designed game. And before we move on to our topic, I just want to give a quick shout-out. By the time you listen to this, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice by Ninja Theory. It's out right now. By the time you're listening to this for $29.99. It is not out at the time of this recording, so I have not played it yet, but I will have impressions for you guys next week. With that, is there anything else you want to talk about before we move on?
No, I think that's about it. Let's jump into it.
Let's jump into our topic. So we decided on a single topic episode this week, and that topic is the Legend of Zelda. And that even just saying that has like weight to it. Even just like that's a big fucking piece of meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just get like right into it, dude. I don't want to waste too much time farting around. The Legend of Zelda is my favorite video game series of all time. It is a very, very special series to me. Literally the first game I ever played was the original Legend of Zelda on our Uncle Aaron's Nintendo Entertainment System when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. So I just it's like that series means a really great deal to me. I've played every game in the series. I've played most of the spin-offs.
Dear God.
Mm-hmm. I have pretty extensive knowledge of the series and stuff like that. It's just a very, very special series to me, and it means a great deal to me. Actually, my engagement ring is probably going to be a Zelda-related engagement ring. So
that's very cute.
It's probably disgusting, but whatever. I have gone through, and what's sort of, before we get into it in earnest, what's your sort of history with the Zelda series?
Like, I had the N64. I think my first introduction to Zelda was Ocarina of Time.
A lot of people's, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, I played a little bit of, like, I beat that one, played Majora's Mask. I honestly don't remember if I beat that or not.
Yeah, I was going to ask which ones you've actually finished.
That's the thing. Like, it's honestly to the point where, like, I played them when I was so young that I legitimately don't remember.
Yeah. So at what point did you sort of fall off?
Let me take a look at this list real quick. Let me see when I fell off.
I wrote out a comprehensive fact sheet of... This is disgusting. This just goes to show you how gross I am. I wrote a fact sheet, and I want you to know that with the exception of the directors, I did not look up any of this information.
Oh, Lord.
I just know this. I made a comprehensive fact sheet of every game in the series, the console they were released for, the year in which they were released, and their game directors. I'm a disgusting human being.
So now I'm looking at it, like, I know I played a little bit. I played Wind Waker. I didn't touch any of, like, the handheld ones until, like, I own, what was it, Link Between Worlds?
That's actually surprising to me, because you and I were really big Game Boy Advanced people.
Yeah, I never really
like GB and GBA, handhelds. We were both very into that, and we both played a lot of like Golden Sun. So it's actually surprising that you never got like the Oracle games or anything like that.
So I think the last one that I personally touched before Breath of the Wild was Twilight Princess.
Okay, so the only two that you have probably beaten are Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, because I put a decent amount of time into all of them, but I don't think I ever beat them except for Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild.
Right. Okay. I mean that makes sense. You know, and that's the story with a lot of people. I think a lot of people are familiar with Zelda, but I think that there are just a certain subset of people that just love it so much they've actually gone through. And I think, first of all, Zelda's a special series for a lot of reasons. I don't think there is necessarily a bad game in the entire series. At least in the mainline games. And I honestly like all of the spin-offs as well. You know, there's the non-canon, like, Philips CDI games, which I'll talk about a little bit later, because I do want to kind of make this, like, a blanket topic. And I want to kind of touch on everything in the series, but those aren't canon. Those games suck, but and they should be erased from history, but I still have a soft spot in my heart for them. But I really don't think there's a horrible game in the series, with the exception of maybe the last game on my list. And with that, I want to, before we get into, I have sort of a breakdown of talking points, and what's hilarious is Zelda is such a big, special series that any of these talking points could be literally their own topics. Like, any of the things that I have listed here, I could make an entire topic about. Like, Zelda is that big of a deal to me. But I do want to kind of cover... I might touch on Zelda again in the future and future topics. I'm not going to promise you that I won't. I want to sort of start by talking about what makes Zelda special. Mm-hmm. To me, and I'm sorry this is going to be a very Seth dominated.
Oh, it definitely is. As soon as you messaged me when I was at work and I was like, yeah, let's talk about Legend of Zelda. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, I know this is going to be a very Seth dominated episode, and I'm sorry for that. I know Todd likes Zelda a lot as well, and especially Breath of the Wild, I think you're going to have a lot to say about.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the one that you probably spent the most time with. I do want you to chime in on the ones that you've played as we get there, but
yeah, of course.
For me, Zelda is a lot of things. It's, you know, excellent puzzle design, excellent music, excellent characters, excellent art. I mean, it's just every great thing about video games is present in Zelda and is great, but my favorite thing probably about Zelda single-handedly, I love the way in which Zelda takes full advantage of its platform. It is always innovative. It is always a titan in design. It is always something where you point to Zelda as the definitive work of that platform. You know, when you look at the Wii, right, and people love to shit on the Wii, but god damn it, the best use of the Wii's idea of motion controls is Skyward Sword.
Yeah, that's... From what I've seen, that definitely is true.
I'm not one of those people that finished Skyward Sword and, you know, totally was drinking the Kool-Aid and going, no, I'm never going to play another Zelda game without motion controls. I was not one of those. There were a lot of people like that. I'm not one of those people. But Skyward Sword, the sword duels in Skyward Sword and the things that require motion controls in that game are fucking phenomenal. And they nailed it. They killed it. I mean, it took them until basically the end of the Wii's life to really get it right. Skyward Sword came out in 2011. They killed it. And I love Skyward Sword for a lot of reasons. People hate it, but I love it. It is kind of low on it's kind of in the middle of my list, but I love the way that Zelda takes full advantage. If you look at Breath of the Wild even on Switch, the Switch is an underpowered console, not for a handheld, which I think it primarily is a handheld. The Switch is an underpowered console, of course, compared to like PS4 and Xbox One, but I'll be goddamned if Breath of the Wild is not a beautiful game, and a huge game, and a detailed game. And, you know, I again, it's just another example of them just getting the most out of their platform. And the fact that you can take Breath of the Wild wherever you want on Switch, I mean, come on. Get out of here. But I want to go through the series. There are 19 games in the series. I want to kind of go through here and kind of list off I have them ranked, and with the exception of maybe the first 5 or 6, this list would probably change anytime you asked me. As of this morning, this is my ranking of the mainline Legend of Zelda games.
All right.
Number 18, and my least favorite, is Triforce Heroes. Are you familiar with this?
Is it one of the ones where you have like, is it like a co-op one?
It is a co-op one. It is a 3-player only co-op game for 3DS that is running on the Link Between Worlds engine.
Okay.
And it's a weird one because I actually kind of love the stupid premise of it. The premise is so stupid. The premise is that you're playing, you go to this kingdom. I forget what the kingdom's called, but it's a kingdom that's like obsessed with fashion.
Okay.
You have all these different outfits that Link can wear and give you different abilities and stuff. And it's not a terrible game, but the egregious sin of that game for me is that you cannot play solo effectively because you have to like take control of the different like totems and shit, and it's garbage. And you also can't play just like 2 players in a totem. You can't mix and match. Like it has to be either by yourself or 3 people.
That's terrible.
I hate that about it. It's not a terrible game. Like I said, I don't think there is a terrible Zelda game. I don't think that has happened.
But
yet.
there can be a weak Zelda
But it is a weak Zelda game, and that's why it's last on my list. And from here on in, really is nothing but, I think, great games. Like, I think I would give, like, on a 10-point scale, I would give Triforce Heroes probably like a 6 out of 10. I think everything else from number 17 on up are like 8 out of 10 plus. I mean, Zelda is just that good of a series. So just because this game is number 17 on my list, don't take that as me saying, oh, this game sucks. It's just, you're asking me, this is fucking Sophie's choice for me. You're asking me to pick between my babies. So number 17 on my list is Four Swords Adventures on the GameCube. This is another multiplayer one. And you notice that at the bottom of my list is where all the multiplayer games sit, because I never really had anybody to play these with. So just not to bury the lead, number 17 is Four Swords Adventures on GameCube, and number 16 is Four Swords on GBA. And it kind of sucks because those games are good. I do like those games, but they're co-op games, and
you can't get the full experience unless you're actually playing co-op, right?
Right. And the interesting thing about Four Swords is it actually had connectivity with Wind Waker, and that was actually kind of cool. But again, I couldn't really take advantage of it because this was not a game that I was really able to play. So it's kind of a bummer. My 15 and 14, my number 15 is Phantom Hourglass, and my 14 is Spirit Tracks. These are sort of the DS Zelda games. The weird thing about these games is it had pretty good dungeon design, but the kind of the big sort of innovation with it is it made use of the touchscreen in innovative ways. That bottom touchscreen, you actually controlled Link with the touch. Think of like Diablo.
Oh, like, do you like tapped?
Well, ish. I mean, wherever the stylus is on the touchscreen is where Link would go to. Okay. So you could sit there and tap, but you also could just hold it and kind of draw, just like in Diablo, you can just kind of like press right mouse and they'll just go wherever the mouse is.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's weird, and a lot of people didn't like it because it's obscuring some of the view, but one of the interesting things that I really liked is you could use the touchscreen also in dungeons to like make notes for yourself. On the overworld, you can be like, oh, there's a treasure chest here, let me circle this on the map, Not bad games at all. Very kind of underrated games. A lot of these handheld Zelda games are really underrated. I feel like people get a little too hung up on like 3D Zeldas, and they kind of ignore both the 2D Zeldas and the handheld Zeldas.
Yeah.
And and that's fucked up. If you ended up actually playing any of these, if I jog your memory about any of these, feel free to pipe in.
Oh no, like most of these, like I know by name, but I've actually never played a lot of the Game Boy Advance ones and all that shit.
Yeah, my number 13 is the Minish Cap. The Minish Cap is actually a really good game. I think anyway. A lot of people have qualms with it. It's actually one of the Capcom Nintendo collaborative games. Actually directed by Fujibayashi, who he's actually, if you look at my list of the directors of the series here, you'll see his name probably more than anybody else. He directed this. He directed like Four Swords, and most recently he directed Breath of the Wild. And what I like about Fujibayashi's games is he's kind of responsible for just like the fucking weird games. Mm-hmm. Like, he had a hand, and he didn't direct Link's Awakening, but that was kind of where he got his start. And then, like, Minish Cap. Actually, they revealed that the Minish were actually originally going to be in Breath of the Wild.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Minish is sort of this race of, like, kind of like... The whole gimmick with the Minish Cap is you had this cap that made you shrink down really small. And the Minish were this like, race that were really, like, tiny. And they were actually going to be in Breath of the Wild. There's going to be a whole section where you interact with the Minish and Link shrunk down.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, it would have been cool, right? It would have been just like a kind of little, like, almost like how the Lost Woods are in Breath of the Wild. Spoilers, I guess. It's just kind of like a section on the map that you can go to. It's kind of its own little thing. But the Minish Cap is a really good game, and more people should give that game love. Number 12 is actually Zelda 2 for NES. Underrated game. That game is not bad. People love to shit on that game because it is very different. Zelda 2, if you don't know, is that one that's like a side-scroller kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
It's like a side-scroller, and it's very, very different, right? Especially to come out just a year after the original Legend of Zelda, which kind of changed everything. Zelda 2, and it did some innovative things with like the towns. Like, actually, if you played Shovel Knight, the way Shovel Knight handles its towns is directly taken from Zelda 2.
Okay.
Where it's like, it's all just on a flat 2D plane, and the townsfolk are walking around and stuff like that, and that's all lifted straight from Zelda 2. It's a direct reference to Zelda 2. And I have a soft spot in my heart for that game. Not enough people give that game love. Number 11 is Twilight Princess, which was on GameCube and Wii, obviously. This one is weird for me because I do like Twilight Princess. I will never forget the hype surrounding Twilight Princess, which even you, probably from the outside looking in, were aware of how hyped that game was.
Yeah, I put some time into that one.
Yeah, so. They recently re-released it on Wii U, and I secretly hope that they put Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD on Switch. That would be awesome. Because just those are great HD remakes. Don't just leave them stranded on Switch or on Wii U rather. The problem with Twilight Princess for me. It's sort of low on my list, I guess, but again, these are all great games. The interesting things about Twilight Princess are not at the forefront enough. Like, I love the concept of the Twilight race. Like, the Zant is a great villain, and they just don't... There's not enough of that, because Twilight Princess had this kind of weird, almost sci-fi kind of vibe. Like, there was a darkness to Twilight Princess. Mm-hmm. And I wish it had a little more of that, because that game, people were a little too... They had their Ocarina of Time boners, right? Like, when they first revealed Twilight Princess, people freaked the fuck out. Because they had just come off of Wind Waker, and people were burnt by Wind Waker, because, a lot of people love to look back on Wind Waker now with the rose-tinted glasses, but Wind Waker was a jarring game when it came out. I'll never forget that. People were butthurt by Wind Waker.
What, because the change in art design or what?
Yeah, because of how it was. They viewed it as like being childish.
Oh,
and it was a little bit of a bait and switch. Because at the GameCube's reveal, they showed this kind of proof of concept trailer for a Legend of Zelda game, and it did look like what you would expect. It looked like what Twilight Princess ended up being, basically.
Okay.
It looked dark, and people loved it. And then when a Zelda game finally comes out on GameCube, what do they see? They see bright and colorful Wind Waker, So they were a little bit butthurt by that, but Twilight Princess was in direct response to that. Twilight Princess was the dark, probably still the darkest Zelda, with the exception of maybe Breath of the Wild and Majora's Mask. Very dark Zelda game. Kind of like Zelda by way of Game of Thrones almost. Just has that kind of vibe to it. Not a bad game at all. I do like that game. Another Capcom one is my number 10, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. This is another Fujibayashi game. And this is a interesting and unique game that is coming hot off the heels of like the Pokemon craze. I'm sure they were pressured over at Nintendo to be like, we need 2 versions of every game now, because you had like Pokemon Red and Blue and Gold and Silver and shit. So they wanted to integrate that into Zelda.
Oh, really? How the fuck did that work out?
So it was interesting because Ages and Seasons, they are different games, but you could actually kind of things that you did in one actually had impact in the other. It was actually a really interesting little experiment back as early as the Game Boy Color. And I don't know if you remember, like in Golden Sun, they kind of did a similar thing where like when you put in Golden Sun 2, you had to like enter in passwords and shit like that. When you played Golden Sun 2, like, I'll be goddamned, there's all of my gear, there's all of my people, So
don't bring up Golden Sun. I can talk about that for a while.
Golden Sun hurts me, dude, because 1 and 2 are excellent. Dark Dawn on DS. Did you play that?
I never actually got around to it.
It's not a bad game, it's not, but like it was not as good as 1 and 2, and so nobody bought it.
That's terrible.
And Golden Sun is all but dead in the water at this point, which is sad because Golden Sun 1 and 2 are really, really special games.
Yeah, they're
Anyway, number 9 is where Skyward Sword comes in. Maybe a little low on my list, considering how much I really do love that game. Skyward Sword is, like I said, I talked about it a little bit. This is another, again, Fujibayashi game. Excellent motion controls, excellent story. Maybe still the best story in a Zelda game.
The thing with Skyward Sword for me is I never actually played it, but I've seen the entire story. And the thing that I love about Skyward Sword is it's like the first in the timeline.
Yeah, it's the earliest in the timeline, and I love the way that it feeds into the rest of the series. Yeah. By the end of Skyward Sword, after the whole shit with Demise, and it sort of sets up, and Zelda does not have this amazing story that everybody, thinks it does, but it does have a great canvas. Yeah. And that's kind of what I love about Zelda, is that the story does not get in the way of everything else. What's important is the gameplay, and Zelda always has innovative gameplay. But Skyward Sword did put a little bit more focus on the story, and I think it was a good game for it. And like you said, I do love the way that it fed into the series proper. It's the earliest in the timeline, and it's kind of cool to see kind of the baby steps of the series. Yeah. So you watched the whole thing?
Yeah, I've seen that entire game played.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Well, again, like, have I gone out and played like all of them? No, but I'm still interested in the series as a whole. So, like, because the thing that interests me the most about Zelda is the timeline. Right. But I sat there and I was like sitting there like I used to sit there and read the timeline. All right.
And it's funny because we still don't know exactly where Breath of the Wild sits on the timeline.
Yeah, I know.
Breath of the Wild kind of is its own weird thing. It references games from every bit of the timeline. Yeah. So, I'm
definitely, and it references Skyward Sword.
Literally in the yeah, Skyward Sword is overtly referenced. I mean, literally, Fee's noise is heard in the game. Yeah. Like, it's straight up in there, and like, so I mean, it's so weird. I'm secretly hoping that with the DLC this winter, I'm hoping that there is something in there that definitively answers where it is.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
My number 8 is Link's Awakening on Game Boy. Okay. Link's Awakening is a really interesting game. This is actually kind of where the Eventide Island, for those that don't know, I don't know if you knew this, is a huge Link's Awakening reference. Okay. Because Link's Awakening is like it starts with you waking up on an island and stuff like that, and you just have nothing. And the interesting thing about Link's Awakening, during the development, the director Takahashi Tezuka, who is one of the original directors of Legend of Zelda, he took inspiration from Twin Peaks, because Twin Peaks was really popular at the time. This came out in '93, and Twin Peaks was really popular, and he really loved how Twin Peaks had just a small set of characters that were really unique, and just kind of had a tighter focus, and Link's Awakening is totally that. Like, Link's Awakening is a very kind of small, intimate Zelda game, and it's weird, and I love it, and not enough people talk about it. This might be a little controversial, my number 7, because people might say that this is too low on my list. My number 7 is Ocarina of Time. And I might take a little bit of flack for this. Ocarina of Time is an amazing game, right?
Yeah. When I first saw your list, I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
That's when I saw it as number 7. But it's like, a part of me respects it because honestly, that like Ocarina of Time is, I think, is for the most part, is like a lot of people's first introduction to Zelda. It was for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people will say it's their favorite.
Of course, yeah.
But
I feel the same way about Ocarina of Time as I feel about like Final Fantasy VII. Like, like these games are great. They're amazing. They're fantastic. They're 10s out of 10s. You know, like these games are incredible. But it's kind of like they're not the best of their series at all. Like when I look at Ocarina of Time was a revolution of 3D role-playing games. Not even just for the Zelda series, but just for 3D role-playing games in general. That game was a revolution. There's no doubt about it. Special game, important game, one of the best games ever made. It is not the best Zelda game. And Final Fantasy is the same way. Final Fantasy VII, revolutionary game, incredible game, great story, great characters. It's not the best Final Fantasy game. So, you know, if you had asked me 10 years ago, Ocarina of Time might have been at the top of my list. But I'm just not that person anymore. The more I've kind of grown up, and the more that I've come to respect Zelda as a series, and the more and more I love it, the more I realize Ocarina of Time's amazing. It's not the best.
Like even recently, like you've kind of like pinpointed your number 1, which obviously we'll get to.
Yeah.
Like even like the last like couple years.
Yeah, it was within the last couple years that I kind of changed what I've always considered to be my favorite Zelda game, and we'll get to that. Ocarina of Time, I do think, is probably irrefutably the best music of the series, which we'll talk about later.
Oh yeah.
Even though Ocarina of Time's music is a little bit of a remix of Link to the Past music, but anyway, we'll get to that later.
Whew.
This might also be controversial. My number 6 and my number 5. This is going to be controversial. So my number 6 is A Link to the Past. Amazing game. 10 out of 10, right? Incredible game. One of the basically from my number 7 on, you're talking about some of the greatest games ever made. If I were making a top 50 games of all time, my number 7 onward to number 1, these would all be on there. A Link to the Past is an irrefutable masterpiece. My number 5, I think, is better. And that's A Link Between Worlds on 3DS. And again, controversial statement, I know. A Link Between Worlds is essentially a glorified remaster of A Link to the Past. It has its own story. It has unique mechanics. It does kind of rehash a lot of A Link to the Past. It is essentially a sequel to A Link to the Past, with the same world and everything like that. But I think that the things that A Link Between Worlds does, it has a really unique way. The kind of rental system with the items and being able to tackle the dungeons in whichever order that you want. And I still really think, I know you own that game. You really should make time for it.
I've put some time into it. I definitely want to like actually sit there and complete it, but it's just there. Whenever I'm looking right at my 3DS right now.
It's a wonderful game. It's so good. It's one of the best games ever made. It's like I said, in terms of top-down 2D Zeldas, it is neck and neck with my number 4, the original Legend of Zelda on NES, as the best top-down 2D Zelda. My number 4 is the original Legend of Zelda on NES, the first video game that I ever played. Incredibly special game. I own this game probably 12 times throughout the years. I love this game. Such a cool design. Like, Shigeru Miyamoto, this is actually the only game in the series that he personally directed. He wanted to make a game that captured the feeling of exploring the wilderness outside of his home in like rural Japan. And that's what Zelda was. I mean, that kind of sparked the entire series. The non-linearity of the original Legend of Zelda is incredible. The fact that the brilliant design decision to not give Link a sword at the beginning, that's so brilliant. Like, when Link wakes up in the first Legend of Zelda, and he has to go to that nearby cave and get the it's dangerous to go alone, take this, blah blah blah. Like, that's so smart. When he first made the game, he had Link start with a sword, and people were just like, okay, what the fuck do I do? Miyamoto made it so that you had to find that sword to acclimate the player to the kind of exploration mindset of like, okay, back then all people knew was like, oh, Mario and jumping and level based. They weren't used to essentially open world games, which the first Legend of Zelda is. It is kind of the primitive open world game. Just it's incredible. I could talk about it all day. It's so good. When they made Breath of the Wild, they made a 8-bit version in the style of the original Legend of Zelda to kind of go back to the series' roots. And Breath of the Wild is kind of a callback to that game in a lot of ways with its design. The lack of hand holding, incredible game. My number 3 is Wind Waker on GameCube. I am not one of those people that were hung up on the art style. I love the art style of Wind Waker.
I'm actually with you on that. I love the art style in Wind Waker.
I think Wind Waker is a beautiful game, even to this day. Even the original GameCube version is a beautiful, beautiful game. I love the cel-shaded art style. It looks great. Some of the best dungeons of the series, some of the best music of the series. It's actually later in the timeline. It's actually kind of a post-apocalyptic game. Yeah. Which a lot of people don't realize, and that is even woven into the story. A great story that has a little bit of a darker edge. We'll get into this a little bit later. It has my single favorite boss fight in the series. Great, wonderful game. My number 2 is from just this year, and you've heard me talk about it a million times, right? It's Breath of the Wild. What more can I say about Breath of the Wild? It's one of the greatest games ever made.
That's the realest shit you've ever said.
I don't have really much to say that I haven't said already. It is a titan in video game design. It is gorgeous. It has an amazing soundtrack. It has great characters. It has a fantastic open world that I lost over 100 hours in. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful game, and I can't recommend that game highly enough. I don't care what you have to do to play Breath of the Wild. You need to play Breath of the Wild. There is no way spoiler alert for when we do our Game of the Year show. There's no way Breath of the Wild is not my Game of the Year this year.
It's my Game of the Year as well at this point.
The game is so fucking good. It is so good. Mm-hmm. And I battle every day with switching this with my number 1. I go back and forth with this all the time, but my number 1 is Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask, and like you alluded to earlier, I just sort of discovered my love for Majora's Mask when they put out Majora's Mask 3D a couple years ago. I had no love for Majora's Mask as a kid. I really didn't. It was just kind of that redheaded stepchild. I hated. It just was I hated the kind of like time limit. It was too intimidating for me. What I didn't come to appreciate until revisiting as an adult is how well that game has woven that system into its design, and how great the characters are, and how impressive it is that they turned that game around in a fucking year. Again, this is what's amazing about Zelda is all these stipulations, right? You're on underpowered hardware. You only have a year. By the way, this is going to be one of the last games for the N64. And they not only did they turn it around and make, it would be hard for anybody to make that even a decent game. They turned it around and they made it the best game. Probably the best game ever made, in my opinion, in terms of raw design. The time-based system is fantastic in terms of both story and gameplay, in terms of dungeon design. The masks are great. The story is dark. I can't say enough great things about Majora's Mask. And even if you have the mindset that I had, where you're like, oh, Majora's Mask sucks, it's the weird one, I don't like it. If you carry that mindset to this day without having revisited it for Majora's Mask 3D, I encourage you, if you have a 3DS, pick up Majora's Mask 3D and revisit it, because I did a complete 180 on Majora's Mask. That game is fucking incredible. I stood there after I finished Majora's Mask with my jaw just dropped. I was like, God, this was so good. Like, I 100%ed it on 3DS, and my mind was fucking blown. To be honest with you, I don't really want to. So that's my ranking as of right now for the Zelda games. I have a list of like the spin-offs and the Philips CDI games that I was going to get into, but we're already like 45 minutes in. I think we're safe to skip that. And honestly, I think we could probably save some of these other talking points for another time. But I do want to. Do you want to call out any of your favorite songs from the series?
I think my personal favorite is a Song of Storms.
Oh, good choice from Ocarina of Time. Yeah, that's a great one.
That's like I think that's my personal favorite.
Yeah. Like I alluded to earlier, Ocarina of Time I think probably does have the best soundtrack of the series, although a lot of it are remixes. Like A Link to the Past has, Kakariko Village and all that stuff. Like that's all in there, but like Temple of Time is amazing. Gerudo Valley.
I was about to shout that one out, and that's another good one.
So good. Even just the main theme, theme of Zelda. I mean, iconic. You don't get better than that.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man.
My girlfriend, she's always, ever since she was young, she's always wanted to walk down the aisle to the Fairy Fountain theme when she gets married. So that's probably gonna happen. Even Wind Waker, you gotta shout out like Dragon Roost Island. Amazing song. Wind Waker has some great kind of like more like, high seas adventure-y type music. Skyward Sword has amazing music. Has a song called Ballad of the Goddess, probably Skyward Sword's main song. Okay. What's amazing about that song, you've probably heard of this. That song is Zelda's Lullaby backwards.
Oh yeah, you did. You did tell me about that.
Yeah, so Zelda's Lullaby played backwards is another amazing song called Ballad of the Goddess from Skyward Sword. It's so good. God, basically every track from Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild just has amazing music. I love the...
the thing I love about Breath of the Wild, though, it's like it's subtle.
Very subtle soundtrack. It's not in your face at all. I love that Breath of the Wild just gives you time to, like, live in its world, Oh,
yeah. Definitely.
It's a very, like, slow-paced game if you want it to be, and you can just explore, and there's just no music going on. But conversely, when you're in the Temple of Time, you're going to hear maybe slight notes of Temple of Time in the back.
Yeah,
I love the weird kind of like sci-fi music from like the shrines.
That shit's so
and the
good.
Guardian challenges. Just like when that game wants to soar, it can, and when it wants to be quiet, it can. I love Cass's song. Like there's some great.
I think that's the most recognizable from.
That's probably the single most recognizable, either Cass's song or the stable song, or the the horse stable song. Which even that integrates Epona's song into it a little bit, and like when you go to the Rudo Village, it integrates Dragon Roost Island. I mean, there's some amazing stuff that game does with music. Like when I first went to Rudo Village and I heard it kind of slowly weave in, I was like, I have goosebumps just talking about it.
I was actually talking to you when that happened.
Yes, I was like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? Like it's just crazy. Like it almost brought like a tear to my eye. Like just the way that game weaves it in. And when you go to Hyrule Castle, and the game. Oh my god. Oh.
I'll be real with you. I got a fucking boner.
Yes.
At that part.
When you get to Hyrule Castle, spoilers, and it's finally playing the main theme. Like the game's never played the main Zelda theme, that dun 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 dun, like, and it's finally doing that.
Yeah, I was legitimately sitting there with a giant smile on my face. I'm just like, yes,
because I was totally cool with the game never doing that, like never even playing that theme at all.
But I'm happy it did.
But when it finally did, oh my god, Breath of the Wild is so fucking good.
Fuck it, you know what? It's number one.
Thank you guys for indulging me on this fucking topic. I want to just like I said, I just want to go through these talking points real quick before you wrap it up, because this is already getting a little bit long. Right. My favorite boss fights, I got to shout out Got or whatever you want to say from Majora's Mask.
Okay.
Amazing boss fight that incorporates the Goron mask in a really cool way. It almost feels like a car chase in a weird way. Like you have to roll around in the Goron mask and you're going on ramps and shit like that to catch up with this giant beast. It's really good. God, the Helmassar King in Link to the Past. A Link Between Worlds has an amazing boss fight with the Stallblind where it has a shield, and what you have to do is, because the whole gimmick with A Link Between Worlds is you can kind of like go onto the walls like a painting. So what you actually have to do is make yourself like kind of 2D painting onto his shield, You meld onto his shield, and he's like picking you up in the air and stuff, and it's really well designed. I love that first encounter with Goma and Ocarina of Time.
Oh, okay.
That very first, it's literally, she's the boss of the Deku Tree, and like, it's just really, really memorable. Like when you look up, the player actually has to look up at the ceiling to trigger the fight. Because you enter the room and you're just like, okay, there's nothing in here, and you literally have you have to look at the ceiling, and then you see Goma's eye just kind of roll back. It's so cool. You got to talk about Twin Mold from Majora's Mask. It's the boss of the Stone Temple Tower when you get the Giant's Mask, and it's basically a kaiju fight. It's so good. And again, going back to Breath of the Wild, basically everything in Breath of the Wild is a good boss fight. Yep. Any 2 seconds you can consider a boss fight in Breath of the Wild. What's my favorite boss in Breath of the Wild? I don't know. The Master Sword Trials is my favorite boss fight in Breath of the Wild. Any Hinox that you fight is my favorite boss fight in Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. Like, Breath of the Wild's gameplay is so, like, freeform. Every second of that game is so much fun to play. Like, they're all my favorite. Favorite dungeons, just kind of rapid fire. Again, any and all of these talking points can be something that I bring up in a full-fledged topic later. But I just want to just rapid fire shout out. Forsaken Fortress from Wind Waker is so good. You've probably, if you played a little bit of Wind Waker, you probably went there. It's that first real dungeon where at the beginning of Wind Waker, you have like no gear at all. Your sword gets taken. It's kind of a prison almost. And you have to, it's a stealth dungeon. You have to like sneak around the first time you're in there. And you're trying to save your sister. You end up going back and doing a really cool fight with Phantom Ganon. It's really good.
Okay.
I mentioned Stone Temple Tower from Majora's Mask. Probably the most well-designed dungeon of any Zelda game. Because midway through the dungeon, you get the arrows and the light arrows, and oh, by the way, the dungeon, it turns upside down, and not only is it an amazing dungeon on one side, but you flip it upside down and it's a whole other also amazing dungeon upside down. Dear Lord. So good. Majora's Mask is such a fucking good game. The Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time, that's a very memorable temple. It's the first temple with Adult Link. It's so cool when you like, it's like, 7 or 8 years or whatever it is has passed, and the world has kind of gone to shit, and it's a very dark that fight at the very end with Ganon and the paintings. God, so good. The music is great. Speaking of Ocarina of Time, you got to shout out Ganon's castle at the very end. The ramp up to that final fight with Ganon on top of the castle is so solid. Like, it just gets you fucking pumped. Probably my favorite, Stone Temple Tower is probably my favorite temple overall in any Zelda game, but I also got to shout out the single best thing about Twilight Princess, before we wrap this up, is the Snow Peak Ruins dungeon.
Okay. I've actually seen that.
Yes, that is, for my money, the single best thing about Twilight Princess. Snow Peak Ruins is so fucking good. It all takes place within this mansion, and you're trying to help this Yeti with his sick wife. And it's very concise. It's very tight, very tightly designed puzzles. Just a very unique. Twilight Princess actually has some really cool dungeons, like City in the Sky is another cool one. Twilight Princess actually has some really unique dungeons, but Snow Peak Ruins is a special dungeon, and you got to shout out that sweet pumpkin soup. But shit. That's pretty much my blanket Legend of Zelda topic there. And what's sad is I cut several things that I could have talked about.
Mm-hmm. I already knew, like, I kind of felt that you were gonna cut some stuff because I actually like looked over at Audacity. I'm like, oh shit, this shit's getting up there.
I knew it was gonna be a long. That's why I wanted to do a single topic episode with this, because I just love Zelda so much and I could talk about it all day.
And see, like after I kind of want to do something similar next week.
Yeah.
An overall Souls topic.
Ooh.
And like, because there's only, I obviously add Bloodborne into that.
Yeah.
But I honestly wouldn't mind. I'm probably end up talking about just the Souls likes as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. We could definitely pull that off.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. I guess spoilers for next week. We'll do a Zelda topic this week and a Souls topic next week. Fuck it. Sounds good.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that's less planning to do on our part.
Boom. There you go.
So that's my Zelda topic, guys. Like I said, I reserve the right to revisit any and all of these talking points later. But that is my ranking of the Zelda series. The Legend of Zelda is my favorite video game series of all time. Every time a new Zelda game comes out, I am reminded of why I love video games and why I'm passionate about this series. And I love it so much. Thank you very much to anybody who worked on the series over the years. If you, for whatever reason, are listening to this shitty podcast, thank you to Nintendo. I love, I'm a huge Nintendo fan, as we've established several times. but it's just the Legend of. I would not be the person I am today without the Legend of Zelda series. So that kind of wraps it up for us this week, I suppose. I guess we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for indulging me. Bye.
Skate 4.
Hey, hang on 2 seconds. I'm going to edit this out. My cat's fucking with something. I got to stop him.
When you're listening to this, I want you to know I got the sweetest dick of all time.
Yeah, he was fucking with an empty water bottle, and that is like a cat fucking with an empty water bottle, I swear to God, is the loudest noise on the planet Earth.
So I want you to know before we start back into what we were doing, I have a secret message for you.
Oh, God damn it. All right. Anyway, so let me just start that over again.